So I have a question. I've kind of started, I think, kind of each week of this series with a question. This week's question is, does life ever feel out of control? Does everything always feel exactly the way you want? Or sometimes, man, it just feels like, ugh. You know, it might be a time from your past that was really chaotic. It might be today that feels that way. Because, you know, there are these times where it just feels like it's all out of control. I mean, certainly, probably pretty much on any given day, something's out of control. But there are times where it feels like everything is out of control. Man, work's not going the way you want. Family stuff's not going the way you want. Financial stuff's not really going the way you want. Maybe even your church stuff isn't going the way you want. You know, in those cases, you know, some of the things that are going on are really big stuff, really scary stuff. But other things might be smaller stuff. But even though it's not going the way you want, that even though it's smaller stuff, it still feels like a lot. It just feels like it's all out of control. And so the thought is that when we're in that experience that, well, if it's all out of control, what would make me feel better? Get it all under control. Because that makes sense, right? If it's out of control, the answer must be to control everything myself. And trust me, that is my natural tendency to want to do that. But I'm not sure that's going to work. Now, as I was putting this message together this week, I remembered a movie from many years ago. I've wasted much of my life watching movies, just so you guys know that. And there's a movie from the 90s called Con Air, like convicts, Con Air. It stars Nicolas Cage. And it's an interesting premise that you've got a bunch of prisoners, kind of the worst kind of prisoners, the worst crimes that people could commit, and they need to be transported from one location to a faraway location. So they're being transported by special airplanes. Apparently there are special airplanes that transport high-risk prisoners. So everybody gets on the plane, they're all kind of shackled up as they're supposed to be, but the prisoners have a plan. And so as they get up in the air, all the prisoners break loose. So now the plane is up in the air, and the meanest, most difficult criminals you can imagine are now running the plane. And there's one guy on the plane who decides that he wants to be in charge. So he decides that he is going to try to intimidate his way and use the strength of his will to take charge of the plane. Now keep in mind, he's surrounded by many criminals who are not going to be easily intimidated. And so as this guy is trying to pull this off, Nicolas Cage's character turns to him and says, "Hey man, you got to understand, you're in a situation you cannot control. You're one person on a plane trying to convince another guy, a bunch of other guys who are not easily intimidated to do what you want." So basically, what Nicolas Cage's character is saying is that you can try and control things as much as you want. None of these people are going to do what you want. And you know what? You have no way out of here. You're in a situation you can't control. Now, in the movie, this is a guy on a plane. But you know what else is a situation you can't control? Life is a situation that none of us can control. Life has far too many moving parts, too much going on to actually try to control it all. Yet what we find ourselves trying to do constantly, in my opinion, is trying to gain control. And as we talk this morning, I'd like to put forth the idea that much of the stress we have in life, much of the anxiety we have in life, does not come from things being out of control. It comes from attempting to control the things we cannot. So as we continue our series, Missing Peace, and as we talk about these ways that we can have greater peace in our lives, I would like to put forth the idea that the solution is not to get more control, it is to get out of control. The solution is to stop trying to control everything. Recognizing a simple reality. You can't. You can't. And trying to do so is operating counter to real life. Because just like that guy on the airplane, people are not going to do what you want, and you got no way out of here. It's life. This is what life is like. But I understand. Trust me, I am a control freak. I am absolutely a control freak. But when things feel out of control, we feel lost, right? We feel overwhelmed because it feels destabilizing somehow. And I really think that that sense of feeling out of control is a major factor in what erodes our peace and what creates anxiety. Because think through life. I mean, there are certainly things in your sphere of influence that you do have some control over. But in the scope of life, in the scope of the planet, forgetting even the cosmos, but just the planet, how much do you actually have control over? The reality is that we have no control over the big things. Where we can control some things, but the really big stuff we don't have control over. So what do? We need to figure out how to look at things differently. I think what we need to do is that rather than trying to gain control over everything, is learn to understand what we can control and what we can't control. Because again, I really don't think that we can control very much. But there is one thing that you can control, one thing that I can control. What can you control? Yourself. Turns out that might even be your only responsibility, is to control yourself. Now, controlling yourself is kind of a big bucket, though, right? I mean, there's our emotions, right? There's our actions. It's our attitude. It's our outlook. That's plenty to focus on. In fact, if we focus on those sort of things, I believe that that is the first step to beginning to find greater peace in our lives. That we take the focus off of what others are doing. Because let's be real, how often do we do that? How much of our lives are spent judging other people, looking at other people? I wouldn't do it that way. They haven't cut their lawn yet. Those people don't cut their lawn. Are they ever going to cut their lawn? Right? Those sort of things. You know, the person in front of you in checkout that has 11 items in a 10-item checkout. Right? How much do we get spun up about those sort of things? That maybe the solution to finding peace, or maybe a key piece of finding peace, is to focus on what we can do, as opposed to what everyone else is doing. And as we go through this today, I want to look at a few things the Apostle Paul has to say, because I think he gives us some good guidance on how to apply this mindset to our life. So what Paul says is, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Now, as we look at that, I would summarize what he says there this way. So often our life is driven by our reactions. Something happens and we react. What Paul is saying is, take your focus off of reaction and put your focus on your actions. When things happen, don't respond, don't react to what someone else did or what sets off your emotion. As you enter into a situation, choose what you're going to do. Choose how you're going to handle it. Paul says, choose to do what's right. Choose to do what's peaceful. When things that are aggravating happen, let them go. Roll with the challenges. When things happen that may not be what you want, is it really as big of a deal as my emotions tell me it is? Or objectively, is it not that big a deal? And I also want to point out that he says, focus on doing what is right. Notice he does not say, focus on being right. How many relationships have been damaged, hurt, or challenged? Because in an issue of disagreement, I can prove that I'm right and you need to know. Instead of focusing on being right, doing what is right. And in many cases, relationships are far more important than being right. I mean, if you're an engineer building a bridge, yeah, being right's pretty important, sort of thing. But in so much of life, just roll with it. Right now, don't focus on those sort of things. Now, but I do want to be careful, though, that focus on doing what's right and not being in conflict doesn't mean we live as people pleasers. Right? Doing what is right means doing what is right. Now, that often means choosing relationships, but it really comes down to the fact that we just don't focus so much on what others are doing. We focus so much more on ourselves. And I truly believe that this kind of guidance, don't repay evil for evil. Don't try to get even. Let it go. Work it out. Choose relationship over getting what you're owed, sort of thing. But doing that is not very hard. I will be open with you guys. This may surprise you. I don't always get this right. Oh, come on, that's got to be funny. Come on. Really? Really? I work so hard for you people. I will actually confess my sins to you. Well, not all of them. You don't want that. I will confess one to you. How's that? We're going to be here a while if we go that route, and I won't be back is probably what would happen too. Let me just focus on one that happened recently. Let's go that route. So Bonnie and I were in a grocery store the other day, which is rare. First of all, that's kind of bizarre for me, quite honestly. We used to shop together a lot, but I'm kind of pretty busy these days. I don't really get a chance to shop with her very often. And we were stopping in the grocery store down in Concord. And we're kind of going together. And it's one of the grocery stores. It's kind of laid out kind of funny that you come through the outer doors and all the carts are there. But the way the carts are positioned, you kind of got to back them out towards the entry door. Then you got to make this hard turn to get to the door that goes inside. And those of you who know me know I like to get things done. So as we walk in, there's this person in front of us on the phone trying to get their cart. And they're like, yeah. Walk up to the cart, stand at the cart for a minute, and then stop moving. Right? And then they start backing the cart up with one hand, and we kind of got to wait for all this. And the person's relatively petite, and they start trying to turn the cart with one hand. And if you've ever tried to do it, that's not easy in the best of circumstances. And so the person's just kind of around, So that person finally gets out of our way. We get our cart, we go inside, and that same person, I am not making this up, is in the entry door in the exact center. No room on the right, no room on the left, stopped. Yeah, I know, yeah. Now, obviously, my heart was jumping with joy through this whole thing. I was frustrated. Now, I gave no outward signs of my frustration, as far as I could tell. I think I kind of held it in pretty good. But inside, I was not peaceful. I was thinking those things you think about people who do stuff like that. And there was no place for that. I mean, let's think about it. What was happening in that moment? She wasn't thinking? Yeah, clearly it's all her fault, and I should tell her that. Oh, no, I want to, trust me. Oh, I want to. But I have an opportunity here. That's what I would agree. But I get it. I want to tell her. Yeah. Oh, I want to tell her. But what was I doing? I was reacting to the situation. And first of all, I have so many, the length of things I could do to be better is so long, right? I mean, the first one, the simplest one, get some perspective. How long did that actually hold me up? Okay, so I'll say 2 minutes on the high side. Probably not. Probably like 1. But it was keeping me from doing what I felt like I had the right to do. Move efficiently, move effectively. And as I did all that, did it change anything? Pretty much, probably cut a couple years off the back end of my life, sort of thing, as I'm stressing out and like, oh, I gotta go, right? Basically, it just burns tons of emotional energy, erodes my personal peace. And I can't control this person. I mean, unless I'm going to get in their face, which I'm not going to do. I can't control what they do. And even if I get in their face, can I control what they do next? No, I can't control this situation. I can't control this person. So just some perspective would have gone miles in this situation. But with time to reflect on it, because I feel like God always has me write the sermons I need to be hearing, sort of thing. So as I was working on this week, I realized there was so much more I could do, right? That I could think about a few things. Bonnie and I are out together, and again, we don't have a lot of time together anymore. So we were out together. It wasn't a high-pressure situation. We're just picking a few things up. Imagine I could have actually just enjoyed the fact that that was true. I found this little thing that was wrong as I missed this big thing that's happening. Because you know what's going to happen one day? Someday, Bonnie and I will not be able to shop together. Someday, one of us will be in the store, and the other one won't be there anymore. So I could have enjoyed the fact that that day wasn't today. Could have enjoyed the fact that I was there with her. And it's kind of funny. We used to shop together a lot, and we always have a pretty good time doing it, kind of get silly about it. And I could have taken the time to enjoy that. I could have also trusted that maybe God had me exactly where I needed to be in that moment. That maybe I needed to slow down and think about it. Maybe I needed to think more about maybe there was something happening in that person's life that was driving them to make that phone call. That could have been a painfully difficult conversation for them. I don't know. Or maybe just their life feels out of balance and they're not able to be quiet and alone, so they had to be distracted by something to feel comfortable. Maybe I was exactly where I was supposed to be when I was supposed to be there, moving at the exact pace I needed to be moving. Imagine if I would have thought about it that way. If I would have chosen any one of those, how much more peaceful would my situation have been? And how often do we let things like that get a hold of us? Things that are not really a big deal, but they drive our reactions. Or even as we kind of come out of the back end of this election cycle, right? There are unresolved elections out west that I didn't get to vote in, you didn't get to vote in, you have no impact on the outcome, the results are minimally impacting our own lives. But how many of us are worked up about those things? Well, we can't change anything about it. We may have desired outcomes, but we can't stress about what we literally have no input and no control over. If we do that, it is going to erode our peace and drive up our anxiety. But if we switch it around and we say, you know what? I'm not going to react. I'm not going to try to control everything. Instead, I'm going to focus on what I can do. How can I act? How is my outlook going to be? What are the actions that I can take? What are the emotions that I will allow to play out in my heart and in my head? Now, as many of you know, I'm a big believer in the 12-step principles that were pioneered by Alcoholics Anonymous. Huge believer in those. And they're most well known for alcohol and other chemical dependencies. But if you've ever talked to me about them, you know that I believe that the 12 steps are pretty much a cure for whatever ails you. That if we bring those principles into our lives, whether you have a chemical or alcohol issue or not, it will reset your perspective in the world. And one of the things, or one of the concepts that AA puts forward, or I should say the 12 steps put forward, is this phrase, and I love this phrase: focus on keeping your side of the street clean. I'll say it again. Focus on keeping your side of the street clean. So the image that creates for me in my head is I kind of picture kind of like a mid-20th century Main Street with a bunch of independent businesses. Yeah, and I have a business on one side of the street. And across from me is another person with a business. And that person's sidewalk is dirty, and their windows are dirty, and that shutter's broken. Now, I could sit here on my side and point out all the things that are wrong with that side of the street. Or each morning, what I can do is pick up a broom, walk outside, and just sweep my side of the street. Make sure my windows are clean. If something's broken on my shop, I'll fix it. It's not my job to fix his. I'm not responsible for him. And if we do that well, it helps us to be less judgmental. Because it turns out if we focus on keeping our side of the street clean, that is more than enough work to keep us busy. We have to accept that we cannot control things, most of all people. And I know that what I'm about to say may surprise some of us, but controlling everyone and everything is not actually your job or my job. Interestingly, God could have chosen to control everything, and he didn't. Because he respects personal choice, allows us to make our choices. If God felt the right thing to do was to let each person make their own choices, who are we to say people don't get to make their own choices? Who are we to say you got to do things the way I think that you should do them? And what an incredibly freeing attitude it is. Because instead of trying to manage everyone in the world except me, I actually have a responsibility over one. I can let go of 7 billion and just take care of one. And when I do that, it helps me to be more compassionate. And when I see somebody do something that bothers me, as opposed to judging them for what they're doing, I have an opportunity. I can choose action instead of reaction. The action can be compassion, but you know what the other action can be? Wow, do I ever do things like that? Maybe not exactly like that. But do I get so focused on what I'm doing that I get in the way of other people? Or do I get so focused on what I'm doing that I speak to people in a way that is not as compassionate as it should be? Do I get so focused on getting things done that I'm not as patient with people as I should be? Those are all lessons I could take away from 30 to 60 seconds. It was probably closer to 60 in a grocery store, waiting for someone to move a cart. Now, the thing is that the key of this whole attitude is really getting the focus off of others in a sense of judgmentalism and moving the focus on ourselves, right? That gives us an opportunity to make a difference. But now I want to ask a question, though. Does the fact that we're not responsible to control everyone's life, right? Our only responsibility is, if you embrace the idea I'm putting forward, our only responsibility, or I should say our primary responsibility, is controlling our own actions, not watching out and not judging everyone else. If we accept this fact that we can't actually be in control, does that mean that we just kind of float through life like a feather in the wind? I can't control anything, just wherever the wind blows me, that's where I'm going to go. Is that what that means? Absolutely not. Right? That we should be engaged with life. In fact, I would say that if you're someone who put your faith in God, someone who put your faith in Jesus, we have an active responsibility to be participants in lives, but not telling other people what to do with their lives. We have an active responsibility to live our lives consistent with the way Jesus demonstrated living his life. Right? Jesus spoke truth, but he didn't tell people what to do. Jesus saw people having trouble, making mistakes, and he didn't tear them down. In fact, why did the religious leaders dislike Jesus so much? Because he had really fun dinners with all the sinners, all the wrong people. So, how do we live that out in our lives? Right? Once we kind of embrace this fact that we cannot actually have control, only control over our own lives, how do we turn that into living a life that is actually active? And we have more indication from Paul. And I love this verse. Paul tells us, don't just pretend to love others, really love them. Hate what is wrong, hold tightly to what is good, love each other with genuine affection, and take delight in honoring each other. So Paul is actually telling us that we should be actively engaging with one another. But if we kind of take fully what he says there, engaging with one another means, actual kind of active interacting with them. But it also means it's about our attitude, right? Or about our mindset. Again, if I go back to the grocery store, was I being loving to anyone? You could argue that because I was thinking the way I was thinking, but being kind of cool on the outside, I think. Was I just pretending to be loving? I think Paul would say so. All right, so Paul is saying that you don't have to be openly rude to not be loving. You don't have to be openly hostile to be loving. That, like Jesus, we should be loving to others, accepting, compassionate, because that's how Jesus demonstrated how to live a life connected to God. And one of the reasons that is so important is that when we make the effort to love and accept people as they are, it gives us a small inkling of how much God loves us. That when we look past people's flaws, past people's mistakes, past the misjudgments that they make, past the times that they do things that hurt us, and still continue to have love towards them. That's how God loves us. That's how Jesus treated people, and that's how God sees us. And one of the things that I'd like to put forward is that in any situation, particularly a difficult situation with a person, that when you experience something that is very difficult, there's a question that we could ask ourselves in that moment. What does love require of me in this moment? What does love require of me in this moment? Not what they need to do, not what they need to know. What does love require of me in this moment? And trying to incorporate that into our lives is not easy. Again, this idea of stopping trying to control everyone else is not about suddenly having a bunch of spare time. Right? Managing ourselves, managing our self-image, managing how we see others is pretty much a full-time job. Right? It's not going to happen by accident. It does take effort. And achieving these sort of things actually requires a great deal of control. Self-control, self-development, learning to direct our emotions. And this point that Paul makes here about don't just pretend to love others. In other words, not, smoochy, smoochy, I love you, hey, see you tomorrow, hey, it's Sunday morning, love you, don't call me. He says really love each other. Be in each other's lives. Know what's happening in each other's lives. Look out for each other. Allow God's love to fill your heart, to move you, to love others more deeply. And I love this point here too. Hold tightly to what is good. Avoid things that bring you down. Avoid people who bring you down. Because I will maintain that you can love people and not let them too far into your life. I have family members like that. I love them, but they are negativity and anger. I don't shut them out, but they're not getting real far in because it's not good for me. We all have people like that in our lives. Choose who you allow to get close to you. You can be loving to people without letting them all the way in. And that idea doesn't stop with just people. I think it has a lot to do with the media we let in. As we talked about last week, the toxicity of politics, of excessive news, all those things are toxic. But it goes beyond that. There's certain fiction I don't read just because the storyline is too dark and too ugly. It's not moralism on my part. It's just that I don't want to think about those sort of things. I don't want those sort of things filling my head. I'll read nonfiction that challenges me, but I'm not going to let dark, ugly things into my head because once they're in there, they don't really get out very easily. Choose what you let in. Choose the people you let get close, and choose the sort of things you listen to, you read, you watch. It really, really matters. When I reached the point in my life where I remember the first day, I don't want to say what movie it was, but I was watching a movie. I was about 20, 25 minutes in, and I was just like, this is entertaining, but I just don't need to watch that right now. I turned it off. And then actually that evolved where Bonnie and I developed a thing is that at any point in any movie, any TV show, we just go, you know what? I just don't really want to let that in right now. And we end it, and we're good. And I will tell you that leads to far greater peace. Because, my friends, the key to finding greater peace in life is not about more control of others. It's about controlling what happens in you, with you, and from you. Letting go of that desire to control everything else and be responsible for the one person you're responsible for. But to be active in love, to be engaging with others, non-judgmental, accepting people as they are. And recognizing that only thing that we can really control is our own attitude, our own outlook, our own behavior, and our own actions. And it's one of those things, the neat thing about this is that some things that we try to bring into our lives are kind of, in software we call it waterfall, where you're here and suddenly you have to be there to be something else. This isn't like that. Every little step you take along this continuum, you will feel greater peace. Every little thing, just one little change, choosing to not be angry at somebody because of something they're doing. One little change to adjust the media you take in. One little change to actually maybe be loving towards someone that's a bit challenging. Each one of those things will move you closer to peace. You will feel the difference, and you will know the difference. But it has to be something we do intentionally, and we have to be willing to recognize that our responsibility is our own self-control.